I still remember that day like it was yesterday. The meeting room was full, the air thick, and before I could even finish my sentence, he cut me off. The boss, the kind of man everyone seemed to fear, looked at me like I was a mistake and said, "You're not capable of this." The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was sharp. It wasn't just what he said, it was the way he said it. Cold, certain, humiliating. No one dared to look at me. No one dared to speak. In that moment, something inside me broke, but something else woke up. Humiliation turned into fuel. He thought he had destroyed me. He had no idea he'd just given me a reason to rise. I didn't respond, not because I couldn't, but because I understood that defending myself would only feed his ego. His power came from fear, not respect. And that day, I chose silence, not submission, but strategy. While he lectured about standards and results, I watched the others. Some looked away, some nodded along. I learned then that workplaces aren't ruled by merit but by alliances, and I had none. Still, I knew one thing: skills can be learned, patience can be sharpened. He was right about one thing: I didn't have the capacity yet. After the meeting, life went on as if nothing had happened. That's how public humiliation works. It evaporates for everyone except the one who bleeds from it. I spent that night replaying every word, every glance. His voice echoed in my head, but what hurt most wasn't the insult. It was how easily everyone accepted it. I could have quit. It would have been easier. But something in me refused. A quiet idea began to form, not of revenge through destruction, but of justice through proof. I didn't want to ruin him. I wanted to show him he was wrong. The following days, I kept my head down, did what was asked, spoke only when needed. He thought he'd put me in my place. I let him think that. He didn't realize that by trying to crush me, he revealed something. His own fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of being exposed. Behind his confidence was insecurity, hidden under authority. And I knew then, fear makes people sloppy. The same stage where he humiliated me would soon be the one where he'd fall. Time showed me that humiliation can be a teacher. Without that moment, I would have never found the drive to prove myself. He thought he was reminding me of my limits, but he was showing me his. In the game of power, the one who reacts loses. The one who watches learns. So I wore the label he gave me, incompetent, like armor, because the best disguise is being underestimated. And when my moment came, I wouldn't need to shout. The truth would speak for me. After that day, I learned the real value of silence. People confuse silence with weakness, but when it's deliberate, it becomes a weapon. I started talking less, listening more. Every meeting became a study session. I watched him, the boss, closely, the gestures, the twitch in his jaw, the way his voice trembled when he lost control. That's where the truth lived, in the cracks of his confidence. While others tried to impress him, I studied his patterns. He thrived on obedience. He needed to be the smartest, the loudest, the one everyone feared. And that is when I saw it. His power existed only as long as no one dared to question. Time passed, and while everyone else chased deadlines, I kept watching. The rhythm of the office was hypnotic. Same meetings, same fake smiles, same hollow compliments, until something broke the pattern. A number didn't match. A report looked altered. Small inconsistencies, invisible to anyone who wasn't paying attention, but I had learned that perfection always hides a lie. I stayed late, cross-checking spreadsheets, running calculations that weren't even my job, and then I found it. A subtle mistake, but big enough to change everything. A financial gap hidden between projects. My pulse raced, not from fear, but from realization. I had just stumbled onto something that could bring everything down. The next days, I moved carefully. No emails, no digital trail. I took notes by hand, made copies quietly. The pattern was consistent. The same department, the same signature. His. The irony hit hard. The man who called me incapable was the one cooking numbers under everyone's nose. But I couldn't act yet, not without proof, not without strategy. So I watched, I studied, I mapped the deceit line by line. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. This wasn't an accident. It was deliberate, built to protect his power and his ego. Every meeting after that felt different. When he talked about integrity and leadership, I almost laughed. The hypocrisy was staggering. He played the part so well that even the most skeptical believed him. But arrogance has a way of blinding the guilty. He thought he was too smart to be caught, too high to fall. He wasn't, and I had the evidence that would prove it. I began testing the waters, small questions, disguised as curiosity. Why did this number change here? Are these reports double-checked? Simple things, but they made people nervous. I could see fear behind polite smiles. Some of them knew. Most just didn't care. That's the thing about complicity. It's quieter than guilt. And in that silence, I realized I couldn't trust anyone but myself. From that moment on, I stopped being the intern who wanted to fit in. I became the observer holding the truth. He still thought I was harmless, but I already knew. One day soon, the truth I carried would be enough to end him. And that day was closer than he could ever imagine. After the discovery, there was no going back. The truth was too heavy to ignore, too dangerous to reveal too soon. My life split in two. The intern everyone saw, and the strategist no one suspected. By day I smiled, delivered reports, kept my head down. By night I built the blueprint for his downfall, each file, each transaction, each timestamp. I was assembling the evidence like a chessboard, and he was already cornered without realizing it. Fear had turned into focus. I didn't just want to expose him, I wanted him to see himself fall, to face the same humiliation he gave me. Only this time, silence would be on my side. The countdown started when I learned about an upcoming board presentation, his chance to bury the fraud for good. Once that happened, the data would be gone. 10 days. That's all I had to turn chaos into clarity. Every night became a mission. Copying files, saving backups under code names, sending encrypted versions to an email only I could access. I moved like a ghost in the system, careful, precise, invisible. The fear of getting caught never left, but instead of paralyzing me, it sharpened my instincts. I didn't sleep much, but insomnia can be disciplined too. As the deadline approached, his behavior shifted. He started watching me more closely, his confidence cracking just a little. "Everything's in order, right?" he'd ask with that smug grin. "Yes, sir," I'd reply, steady as stone. He heard obedience. I knew it was control, the kind that comes from knowing the ending of a story no one else can see. By the final week, the plan was airtight. I had proof, motive, and timing. But this wasn't about revenge anymore. Not entirely. It was about truth, about balance, and I knew exactly when and where to strike. At the next board meeting, he would stand in front of the company, full of pride and lies, and I would take the floor, calmly, and let the truth do what revenge never could. Expose. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. My nerves pulsed with a mix of fear and purpose. What if something went wrong? What if he blamed me? But then I remembered his own words. In this company, only those who aren't afraid to lose survive. He was right, and tomorrow he'd learn what losing really looked like. The morning of the meeting arrived faster than I expected. The city was still half asleep when I left home with the flash drive in my pocket. The kind of morning where you can feel that something irreversible is about to happen. I walked into the building like I always did, but the air felt heavier. I opened my laptop to do one last review and froze. The files were gone. Every single one. No backups, no traces. That's when it hit me. He knew. Panic tried to surface, but I pushed it down. He might have deleted my work, but he didn't know I had a backup hidden off-site. Still, the message was clear. The game was no longer silent. He was fighting back. Minutes later, a message popped up. "Boss wants to see you." I walked into his office, calm on the outside, storm inside. He leaned back in his chair, smiled and said, "You've been a little too curious for your own good, haven't you?" The air turned electric. He didn't need to raise his voice. The threat was in the tone. "People who dig too deep around here disappear," he said. I met his eyes and replied, "I just do my job, sir." It was enough. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He started making moves, cancelling meetings, rearranging agendas, stalling time, but it was too late. The board had already locked the schedule. His fear was showing, even if he tried to hide it behind that same confident smirk. And fear, once it shows, spreads fast. The man who once humiliated me was now second-guessing his every move, and I, the intern he called useless, was the reason why. That night I got an anonymous email. "If you go through with this, you'll regret it." No sender, no signature. I read it once, then deleted it, because threats only matter to people who still have something to lose. I'd already lost everything that made me afraid. Tomorrow I would walk into that meeting and end his illusion, once and for all. And when the truth came out, it wouldn't need my voice. It would speak for itself. That day I walked into the boardroom with the composure of someone who had already lost fear. I wore my usual impassive face. The intern nobody noticed. But in my pocket lay the proof of everything. There was an odd tension in the air, restrained gestures, rehearsed smiles, as if everyone sensed the end of a story. He went on stage with his usual arrogance, ready to sell his numbers. The board settled in their seats, eyes ready to applaud. I waited quietly for my moment. I knew the best revenge doesn't shout. It sits patiently until truth can strike. When my name was called, I felt a brief chill, not panic, but focus. I opened my folder and began calmly. No theatrics, just data. Cross-referenced lines, bank records, timestamps, signatures. Each page I revealed unraveled a lie, like pulling a thread from a poorly made coat. Bit by bit, the deception fell apart. His face shifted from superiority to disbelief, then to restrained panic. The audience moved from curiosity to judgment. I didn't need shouting or sensational accusations. The damage was factual. Numbers don't lie, and evidence weighs heavy. The elegance was letting the documents do the work. As I spoke, I noticed tiny signs around me. Colleagues exchanging glances, hands covering mouths, the fragile veneer of privilege tearing. He tried to interject, a question, a counter-argument, but his voice wavered. He attempted to salvage the narrative with charm and veiled insults, but every attempt only deepened his exposure. The leadership that once shielded him started to distance itself. This was no longer just between him and me, it was a public unmasking. There was a cold beauty in it. Justice arrived in the most objective form possible, precise, relentless, undeniable. When I finished, I left the final page on the table and said a few measured words that needed no venom, just truth. No triumphant gloating, no victimhood. A short line deliberately placed. Capability isn't given, it's proven. The silence that followed carried more weight than any applause. I watched him deflate. I watched the burden he'd carried for years be unpacked in front of everyone. He fell not with theatrics, but by the same logic that raised him. Manipulation shown in numbers. The triumph was, above all, being greater than provocation, restoring balance rather than indulging in spite. After the meeting, the fall was swift. Internal audits, suspension, accounting under scrutiny. I was called to testify, and my words mattered because they came with documentation. I received different looks for the first time, not pity, but respect. I hadn't sought to humiliate for pleasure. I wanted truth recognized. And in doing so, I learned something vital. Sweet revenge isn't becoming the monster you fought. It's restoring balance with intelligence and integrity. I left that room with the weight of victory, but without the expected bitterness. I'd gained something bigger, the certainty that justice, when applied well, corrects without corrupting. After the meeting, the building fell into a strange kind of quiet, the kind that follows an explosion. People still spoke, but in lowered tones as if volume itself could awaken danger. I watched from the sidelines. There was nothing left to prove. The truth had already spread, through whispers, through glances, through the sudden shift in who looked away and who didn't. He, the man who once humiliated me, still showed up to work, but he was a ghost now. The confident stride had turned hesitant, the smirk brittle. Every mention of audit made his shoulders tighten. Power fades quietly, and watching it unravel was the most silent victory of all. He tried to keep appearances. Short meetings, forced laughter, clipped commands, but no one looked at him the same. Respect had curdled into caution. Fear had changed sides. Those who once clung to his approval now kept their distance. And he felt it. The isolation, the slow collapse of relevance. I almost pitied him. Almost. Sometimes he'd catch my gaze across the office, searching for some sign of intent, some confession that this was my plan all along. But I never gave him that. Silence still worked for me. The truth, once freed, doesn't need a spokesperson. One afternoon, we ended up alone in the elevator. He stepped in, pretending to check his phone. The air grew thick. For a few seconds there was no hierarchy, just two men in a box, both carrying what they'd built. When the doors opened, he muttered, "You won." I said quietly, "No, I learned." Then I walked out, letting the closing doors say the rest. Days later, rumors became headlines, internal reviews, disciplinary action. His name vanished from the company portal like it had never existed. I didn't feel triumphant, just at peace. Seeing fear on his face was never the goal, but it was the inevitable consequence. The world has its own way of collecting debts, and in that quiet, I understood something profound. Fear is its own justice. People congratulated me, others just nodded, careful, thoughtful. Maybe they feared me now, not because of power, but because I'd shown how dangerous patience can be. I didn't feel revenge anymore. I felt distance. He was trapped in his fear, and I, finally, was free from it. The following weeks were a slow-motion collapse. His name became shorthand for scandal, whispered in hallways that once echoed his orders. Everyone had an opinion now. Everyone acted like they'd always known. The irony didn't escape me. The same people who applauded him now avoided his name like a curse. I didn't gloat. I watched. I didn't need a spotlight. His downfall created its own light, and it landed on me almost by accident. The company scrambled to clean up the mess. New leadership, new structure, new rules. Somewhere in that chaos, my name started circulating in meetings where I'd never been invited before. The intern who caught the fraud, they called me. It was surreal, not prideful, just strange. The silence that once hid me was now the reason people noticed me. I'd become visible by doing nothing more than standing by the truth. At one meeting, the new director mentioned my story as an example of integrity. I sat there, half listening, half detached. I wasn't brave. I was simply tired of being quiet. And as I looked around, I saw faces that once ignored me now filled with admiration. No resentment, just a quiet realization that the story had turned. It's funny. Truth doesn't shout. It changes things from underneath, one perception at a time. A few days later, I was asked to present a new project, the same one he once said I wasn't capable of leading. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. Same room, same long table, same smell of burnt coffee, but this time, no one laughed. I spoke with calm precision, walked them through the details, and when I finished, the silence that followed wasn't humiliating. It was full of respect. That was the real turning point. The story had shifted, not about revenge, but redemption. Recognition came quietly. No applause, no grand speeches, just nods, handshakes, and a promotion that felt like closure more than reward. I accepted not for validation, but as a way to mark the end of something. The light that once exposed me now illuminated me. And the sweetest part was knowing I hadn't stolen anyone a spotlight. I'd simply waited long enough for it to find me. When everything settled, I realized the story was never about victory. It was about understanding. The anger that had once fueled me had burned out, leaving something cleaner behind. Strength without noise, confidence without revenge. I walked the same halls, saw familiar faces pretending not to remember. The building was the same, but I wasn't. Then one day, they asked me to speak at an internal event. "Tell your story," they said. I smiled. Funny how humiliation can become a keynote speech if you wait long enough. I stepped onto the stage and faced the room. The same space where I'd once been dismissed now waited in silence for my words. I hadn't written a speech. I didn't need to. I spoke the way I'd lived through it, quietly. Once, someone told me I wasn't capable, and for a while I believed them. But I learned something. Capability isn't given. It's proven through work, through silence, through patience. I paused, letting the stillness hold the weight of it. Not everyone who underestimates you is your enemy. Some are just there to push you where you were meant to go. And then I smiled. This time, the silence that followed didn't hurt. It healed. When I stepped down, the applause came softly, not loud or showy, but real. The kind that carries gratitude more than excitement. I looked around and saw people who recognized themselves in my story. People who had been overlooked, dismissed, silenced. And I understood. This story was never just mine. It belonged to everyone who's ever had to prove their worth quietly. In the days that followed, people came to talk. Some thanked me. Others simply said, "I needed that." It was humbling to see how truth resonates when it's not dressed in pride. Because at the end of it all, I learned the simplest lesson of all. Silence isn't emptiness. It's the sound right before transformation. Time passed, and everything settled into quiet normalcy. The scandal faded, the company rebuilt itself, and I moved forward. I was promoted, yes, but that wasn't the real victory. The real one was internal. I learned that winning isn't about defeating someone else. It's about not becoming like them in the process. Success, when it finally arrived, felt calm. No fireworks, no headlines, just peace. The kind that comes when you know you didn't trade your integrity for applause. The best revenge, I realized, is the kind that leaves no bitterness behind. The company changed. New leadership, new culture. People talked more about ethics, about doing things right. Maybe it was because of what happened. Maybe it was fear. I didn't care. The result mattered more than the reason. Sometimes I still hear my name mentioned as an example. I smile quietly, because what I did wasn't heroic. It was endurance. The quiet kind that grows from refusing to give up even when no one is watching. If life taught me anything, it's that justice comes, but only for those who wait without surrender. Months later, I heard he'd left town, started a small consulting firm somewhere, and I wished him well. Not out of forgiveness in the moral sense, but out of freedom. Because holding on to hate means you're still stuck in the moment that hurt you. I wasn't stuck anymore. Forgiveness, I learned, isn't pretending it didn't happen. It's choosing to live like it no longer controls you. Now, when people ask how it all began, I tell them it started with a single line. "You're not capable." And I smile, because now I know that sentence was never an ending. It was an invitation, a challenge to build, to rise, to prove. Capability isn't something you're given. It's something you forge, quietly, patiently, until the world finally catches up to what you've known all along. So if someone ever tells you that you can't, don't argue, listen, learn, and then prove them wrong, silently. Because the sweetest revenge isn't to destroy, it's to grow and to walk away in peace. If this story touched you, if you've ever lived something like this, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tell us in the comments. What was the moment when someone said you couldn't, and you proved them wrong?